It's wonderful to see you here. You made it through parking and some of the other traffic if you're coming down from Salt Lake and so forth, so we welcome you. My name is Susan Madsen. I'm a professor of leadership and ethics here at UVU in the Woodbury School of Business. I also am the director of two statewide projects, one called the Utah Women in Education Initiative, and one that is hosting this event called the Utah Women in Leadership Project. We have 4 events, well, we have more than 4, but 4 evening events in the Utah Women's Leadership Speaker and Dialogue Series, and this is the 4th. And this is the first one we've had focused on men, and we have men here on the panel, except for one woman. You may have noticed the Lieutenant Governor is not here, but we have a good replacement. I was in Argentina until yesterday, was supposed to be back Monday, but 30 hours later, here I am with a little bit of a cold, so you'll have to excuse that. And we didn't hear until Monday afternoon that he was unable to go. He was assigned to be at another event by the governor. And so Ann is, and we'll introduce Ann in a moment. So we are sad he's not here, but we have a great replacement. So I also want to just thank our many sponsors for this event: the Woodbury School of Business, Squire Higher Perspective, UVU Women's Success Center, Utah Community Credit Union, Crandall Corporate Dietitians, Jeffrey and Katie Nelson, the Utah Education Network, Women's Business Center, and the Women's Leadership Institute. So we appreciate them for their sponsorship and help. Also, we have some wonderful volunteers, and I just want to make sure I forget sometimes to do that thank you. And also thank you, and she's probably not here, but Bonnie and Robin, who work tirelessly on these events, and thank them so much for this. Also, we have some social media if you're interested in tweeting or anything. Just wanted to give you that information. Would love to have some of that. So those are a few things. Tonight, what we have is this panel, as you know, and we'll have an introduction of that, and I will be moderating the panel. But we schedule these for 2 hours. That doesn't mean we'll be in this room for 2 hours. We actually are planning to stop about 8 o'clock. And then we have, you'll see in the title, we have a dialogue. And although we weren't able to get tables out there, we will have some vegetables and dessert bars, and we're hoping that you will find a place and be able to just dialogue and talk about this conversation. In terms, I'm a professor, and I know learning theory quite a lot, and so when you go to an event, if you don't have time to talk about it and share some of your thoughts, it doesn't stay with you as long. So we like to have that space for people to talk and just about their own ideas and so forth. So we'll do that the last 30 minutes. It'll be out in the hall. And there's other places if you wander down. It's a big building. There's plenty of places to sit. So again, we welcome you and am excited about this panel. And I have invited a good friend of mine, Paige Holland, who is related to someone on the panel. She's the first lady of UVU, and she has worked with us for the last many years, supporting the work that we do on getting more women to graduate from college, but also having more girls and women develop voice and confidence. And she has willingly, she will do the introductions.
Okay, well, I am honored to be able to introduce our wonderful panelists tonight. We will start with Dr. Ann Wyra-Poe. Dr. Ann Wyra-Poe is the director of the Women's Success Center here at Utah Valley University. She holds a PhD in Educational Leadership and Foundations from Brigham Young University, where she was the director of the Student Leadership Department. She's been involved in higher education and leadership for the past 20 years, and now specializes in helping women commit to and achieve their educational goals, including exploration in business and STEM fields. Currently, Ann teaches several leadership development classes and has loved teaching women in business for the Woodbury School of Business at Utah Valley University. Her research interests include leveraging social network structures, among her higher education scholars, mentoring for women leadership development, and most recently, her work has been published in the Journal of Leadership, Accountability, and Ethics, as well as Advancing Women in Leadership Journal. Between working for BYU and UVU, Anne married a New Zealander and lived abroad for several years. 2 children later, she's thrilled to be back in Utah, working with fantastic women who want to make a difference in the world. Anne Wyra-Poe. Our next panelist is President Matthew Holland. Matthew S. Holland is the president of Utah Valley University. It's what he asks us to call him at home. He's been serving at the university since June of 2009. Before assuming his current position, President Holland was an associate professor of political science at BYU, where he taught courses in political philosophy and American political thought. He graduated from Brigham Young University with honors in 1991 and was valedictorian for the political science department. That same year, he was awarded the Raoul Wallenberg Scholarship for a year of graduate study at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Before going on to earn his master's degree and PhD in political science at Duke University, President Holland served as chief of staff for the top executive of the international consulting firm called Monitor Group, and later as a special assistant to then Governor Michael Levitt. Currently, he serves on numerous community boards. He and his wife, old what's-her-name, have 4 children, Jacob, Mitzi, Grace, and Danny. Ron Gibson is Questar's chairman, president, and chief executive officer. He has served as chairman of the board of directors of the American Gas Association, the Western Energy Institute, and he serves on the gas board of directors. And he serves on the Gas Technology Institute's board. Ron is also chairman of Utah State University's Board of Trustees. He's past chair of both the Salt Lake Chamber Board of Governors and the Economic Development Corporation of Utah. He serves on the boards of IDACorp, Idaho Power Company, and National Fuel Gas. He has also served on a number of other community and nonprofit boards. Ron graduated from Utah State University in civil engineering and received an MBA from Westminster College. Ron and his wife, Janet, have 3 sons and 9 grandchildren. We're happy to have you here, Ron. And finally, Bill Hulterstrom, last but certainly not least. Bill Hulterstrom has been helping individuals and families improve their communities throughout North America and overseas for more than 30 years. Bill began his career working at the Utah Special Olympics, where he served as project director. He soon accepted a position at United Way of Utah County, where after only 2 years, he was promoted to president and CEO, a position he continues to hold today. Bill has distinguished himself as a recognized leader and trainer in the areas of volunteering, board governance, nonprofit leadership, and community building. Bill has served on scores of local, state, and national committees, boards, and task forces. Bill and his wife, Tammy, are the parents of 2 children and live in Provo, Utah. Bill, we're happy to have you here today. And I'll turn the time over to Dr. Susan Madsen, who will act as the moderator for tonight's discussion.
Thank you so much. And I don't know if you had noticed, but especially with the Lieutenant Governor, but Anne is here and I'm happy with that. But what I did in designing this was try to pull someone, first of all, that I knew well and trusted well, in terms of that they really have shown through action, not just speech, but action, that they support strengthening women. And that's really an important thing. But I wanted some representation from different sectors. So I don't know if you caught that. But Ron is from corporate sector, and President Holland would represent education, and Bill the nonprofit area. And then I had asked the Lieutenant Governor to really represent the government politics area as well. So Anne, you got to pop over there. Okay. And so we just wanted different perspectives with that. So I'm going to start and just fire away a question. And the first question I want to ask is, before we get into the meaty stuff, I wanted to have you talk for just a few minutes each about one or two women in your lives who have profoundly influenced you and also really are influential in the community or in other ways as well. So, Ron, would you start?
Sure. Thank you, Susan, and good evening. It's great to be here. I especially want to thank President Holland because I was able to get through Utah County with an Aggie license plate. And so
we have your number, and there could be further ramifications, but we won't go into that tonight.
I did see a tow truck coming in, so I may need a ride home if anyone's available. But I do really appreciate the opportunity to be invited to be here tonight, and we're looking for forward to a great dialogue and some good interaction, but on an interesting topic. When I think about women in my life, obviously, two women I'd have to mention are my mom and my wife. Now, my mom, mothers are great because no matter what you do, they're there to support you. And so I'd have to say influentially, certainly my mother. My wife is equally important from the standpoint of she keeps me grounded. And whenever I start to think that I understand women or that I understand anything, my wife will let me know that I'm wrong. And so she's not here tonight, and but some of you know her, and she just keeps me very well grounded, which I appreciate. But as I thought about this question, actually it was an experience that I had earlier in my career that truly showed me the importance of diversity and how much we can all learn from each other. And I was, as Susan indicated, and the fact that I work in the energy industry, that's an industry that is certainly a male-dominated industry. There's different reasons for that, but seems to be the case. And when I was about mid-career, and I was in a general manager position and anticipating the next promotion would be vice president of operations. Well, the CEO at the time put a woman into that position of vice president of operations. One of the few in the country where a woman was put into that position. Now, it created, as you would expect, quite a reaction. And I have to confess, I had a similar reaction. But her experience had been in HR, not in operations. To her own admission, she didn't know very much about operations, where several of us had spent most of our careers. But what I learned is a very good lesson, because I decided that in support of her in that position, and I reported directly to her, that I was going to do everything I could to learn and to try to decipher why the selection. And what I learned very quickly is, though she didn't have a lot of experience with operations, she had a tremendous amount of experience with human relations. And her ability to work with very difficult situations in the operational areas, and then to rely on others who could help her on the sides that she didn't have the experience, taught me a great lesson. And what started out to be probably not a positive reaction, at the end of the opportunity of working with her, I realized how much I'd truly learned about people, about doing things outside the box, things that typical male engineers have a hard time with. And I think we wear that label well. And so I learned a great deal about looking outside from her, and she was very influential in that regard.
And Ron really leads, his company really leads the state on things that they're doing to develop women and support them. And that's why I asked him to be on this panel. So appreciate that, Matt.
you.
Or President, sorry.
That's fine. Your pay will be docked. No, I like to be called president at home and here and everywhere. And I guess the first thing I'm taking from this night together is that Ron was grounded by his mother and his wife. That's quite an accomplishment. So I too have to say something about my mom. And I thought of this, especially the way Susan phrased the question, thinking about people who've influenced your life, who are influential and known more broadly. And my parents are known to a few people in this state. And, a lot of people make an assumption. My dad was a university president, and now I'm a university president, and my father and I are very close, and he has been a great mentor and role model in my life. But if you promise not to tweet it or tell him this, my mom was really the more influential figure in my life, I think, in developing as a leader, in part because she just kept telling me I was a leader. When I didn't even know what that meant, I just was some scared little kid who wore a lot of corduroy. But she just kind of kept seeing something in me and told me that I was a leader and sort of had expectations for me, not in a demanding way, not like she was forcing me to do something, but just in that sort of power of positive reinforcement kind of way that I think put me in a position to later in life, as I'm working through a graduate degree and a career and other places where then I probably did talk more to my father, and we had a lot in common and things that we would exchange. But I don't think I would have gotten there, quite honestly, without the leadership of my mother in our home and how she taught me and all of my siblings, including my sister, to be a leader and to think about those things not in a selfish way, not in a for the sake of power way, but in a way to contribute and to help good things happen. And so she'll always be really preeminent in my life that way for those early years of my development. So. I have an extraordinary wife too, and she would certainly be on the list, but I think you probably want us to go beyond just immediate family connections. So just quickly, if I can, I'll just give two examples, and they're influential in different ways. One is a woman named Peggy Noonan. Some of you may know her. She's a journalist with the Wall Street Journal. She was a speechwriter in the Reagan administration. And, Ronald Reagan was considered the great communicator as a president. But she was the secret behind so much of his success. And what's unusual about that is, in the 1980s, the Republican Party wasn't exactly seen as the home to opportunity for women necessarily. But she managed to navigate her way into the White House because of her talent and her ability to communicate herself. And she just had so much to say about that. So I read what she writes. I don't always agree with everything. And not everything she writes is wonderful. But anyway, she has taught me a lot about the power of communication in leadership, both from what she does and how she helped President Reagan and subsequently President Bush. And there's been a lot to learn from her. And then a more immediate local example. And she was just on this campus the other night to be honored. I was able to give her an award with several other former presidents of UVU. Was a woman named Liz Hitch. And Liz was the interim president between me and Bill Cederberg, who was my predecessor. And one of the things I pay tribute to her for is that she navigated this institution during a very difficult year. Major budget cuts, could have put off some hard decisions. She didn't. It would have been easy for her to leave those for me to take care of as the new president. She took care of it and did a very good job. Was at one point got a standing ovation from faculty and staff for how she navigated a very difficult thing. And you might think at that point, well, she's interim. She just got a standing ovation. Would she still want want to try to be the president. She absolutely slipped back into that number 2 role, was absolutely loyal to me, but yet, in a remarkable way, was loyal to me and supported me and counseled me, but she also mentored me. I was coming as a junior faculty member. I had not really had any administrative experience. And I watched her in her role as I watched her run academic affairs. And she had this wonderful combination of strength and directness, but also brought this kind of sensitivity and awareness that, sometimes you don't always see in male leaders. And I just was so impressed. And I watched her a lot that year, and I'm always very grateful for that, and was able to say that the other night, and she's been on my mind lately. So that's another example.
Thank you. Anne?
Test. Are you sure we shouldn't talk about Paige a little bit more, because she's really awesome?
I can talk about Paige. I don't know if I get a fourth option here, but I was getting the old, eye from Susan about it's time for you to be quiet and move the microphone up.
Well, wearing my political hat, I have to say that when I heard Condoleezza Rice speak, when Orrin Hatch brought her in recently, that was just a milestone event. And any person, let alone a woman that's going out internationally and having these experiences, is just remarkable. Of course, Madeleine Albright says there's a special place in hell for women that don't help other women. And so I've always kept that in mind, that, and we have things like the Queen Bee syndrome. It's really important to break those stereotypes and reach out to other women. There are so many examples, but we can't do this without a shout out to Sheryl Sandberg and Lean In. I hope many of you have read that book. I hope that you have an opportunity to, peruse the ideas and weigh in on them and start to feel the power of what's there. You may disagree with some of the things, but there's really a motion to move forward as women and take the time and the thought to believe in ourselves, which is a very unique thing. On a personal note, I had 2 grandmothers, and as I listened to Paige tell her personal story not too long ago, we had similar grandparents in that those women were not able to finish school. They didn't have the opportunity to get all the education that they wanted. They worked quite difficult lives. My grandmother worked in the potato pits in Idaho to make sure that her kids would have an education, and I'm the beneficiary of that. And so family things, political things, they all add up. And of course, I want to say something about one other person that I learned to love, and that was Minerva Teichert. She's an artist, and so much of her work we see hanging in the halls of BYU and different universities. She gave those paintings for people that needed education, whether it was granddaughters or it was somebody from her community. She grew up on a ranch, but she also had this beautiful artist inside of her, and she found a way to really leverage that. So I think we're surrounded by a lot of wonderful examples. Susan, you've been a mentor to me. I appreciate that. She's really taken the lead in helping Utah move forward and change the paradigm that we aren't as forward-thinking about women as we should be. So there are many great women in my life.
Thank you so much. And Bill?
Actually, a very, very tough question. I think it was a very hard question, the influentials, and I can break it into kind of 3 categories with an example of each. I'll start with just the family one. My mother, wife, and there's a niece over here. Wow. My mother always used 2 quotes that I've never forgotten that have affected my leadership style. Her first quote that I don't know where she got it, but reminds me, you would worry less what people thought about you if you realized how seldom they did.
That's Eleanor Roosevelt.
I'm glad. I appreciate. I'm just taking my mom. My mother would tell me that all the time. And the second part, and you can tell me who told this one, was it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And with that, nice has become always one of my favorite words. If it could have one word on my tombstone, it'd be nice. And it just gets me all of a sudden. Gee. The second woman, of course, is my wife, and because she keeps me grounded. I remember early in my career, I had a chance to have dinner in the White House, which I thought was a really pretty big deal. Remember, back in the days when they used to have payphones, I'd call on the payphones, and guess what I did? And the response was, "That's nice, dear." Then she went on and mentioned some other thing that was far more important to worry about. She keeps me grounded. The last one would be my daughter in that family genre. When I gave her this topic, talked about this topic, and she goes, "No, duh." Of course we should care about strengthening women. So the family genre, the second is my just passing through life experience, a teacher in high school by the name of Betty Edwards. And this was the 70s, and this was kind of the beginning of the women's lib moment. She was a self-described women's libber. And I was this very kind of naive, and she had the greatest influence about thinking differently, being not afraid to think differently, not being afraid to speak up. And I have no idea why. I think about her often ever since then. And my first point on that, by the way, is there's a teacher made a difference. Don't forget to tell them. But this teacher made a profound difference. The second part of education that made a strange difference to me was a lady by the name of Mrs. Williamson. She was a cafeteria worker at college. And every day I would walk through that line, she would talk to me, encourage me, want me to do more, ask about my classes. And I will never forget. And she'd actually save me the ice cream and strawberries. But she made a difference in my life. And so I realized at every level of life, someone can make a difference in my life. And those two genres are the two that kind of merged together of just influentials that have probably changed and affected me on this topic that I think is very important.
Thank you so much. The next question is, and I would like you to move it along a little bit quicker.
See, I knew it.
I have never in my life been accused of giving a short answer, Susan. And there are a few people here that know that.
No, the next question is, why is it important for girls and women to be educated first? And I really want you two to hit that, but also to just develop their voices, to be confident, and to, you know, our project is about leadership, informal and formal leadership, to actually step forward and lead. So let's talk about the education piece first. So, President?
Yeah, I would love to start with that because there's an absolute link between education and leadership. I mean, there is such a thing as natural-born leaders. We know that, whether we admit it or not. There are people who they have the confidence, the charisma, the whatever, to just kind of be leaders. But it's not like everybody's like that, and we can't just leave the world to those people. We need more leaders than that. And the key to achieving the ability to lead, I believe, fundamentally is found in education. Education gives you that confidence, and it gives you an ability to think through an issue, an ability to take a position and know why you take a position, and be able to assemble data and argument and logic and use persuasion is really hard to do. I mean, again, maybe you've got that by native gift, but if you don't, you got to find it, and the best way to find it is to get educated. And so I think it really does, education just opens up the doors of leadership for whomever, girls or boys. And as someone committed to student success in general, I think they've got to start with the education piece if they're going to emerge as leaders.
And you're talking, I know because I've heard you talk about this, you're talking not just leadership in businesses or whatever, you're talking about leadership in a broader sense, correct?
Absolutely. You know, I think that's a mistake we sometimes make. We equate leadership with position. And we need leaders everywhere. I mean, there's too much at stake in everything that we're doing. We need leadership in our homes. We need leadership in the communities. We need leadership out in informal settings. And so whatever the moment, formal and informal, someone who can step forward and help direct and shape things in a positive way into positive outcomes. That's leadership, and it's found all over the place. And education, if you let it, just puts you in a position to have that influence in a more powerful way.
Thank you. And Anne is the senior director of our Women's Success Center, which we started and appreciate President Holland's support in that about, is it 3 or 4 years ago now?
2011.
Oh, wow. Time moves along when you get older. And you've seen, I mean, you have stories, so many stories. So you have seen why education is important specifically for women, young women, but also women returning that have gone through some struggles. So anyway, speak to that.
Well, there's so much to talk about here. I think that for me, having worked at 5 different universities and knowing that at this university, as an open enrollment university, that a lot of times our students really are operating without a net, whether they know they will move forward or not. they need that education, and women need it so much. We know that 8 out of 10 women in the state of Utah at some time will be the main breadwinner for their family. We also know that most young women, thanks to your study, Susan, have every intention of finishing school, but when you get down to the hardcore, do you have a plan? Do you have the finances? Can you do it? They really don't have those things outlined. They intend to finish, and they think they can always come back. And what we know is that it's more difficult as you try to do that. Staying in school, finishing is really the easiest and best path. And when you compare that to some of the places that we, in our world, there is such a variety and such a difference of ways that women are treated in the world. Susan did an op-ed piece about women in Indonesia, and you talk about femicide and those kinds of things. And then you look at Norway, where they're bringing women on their corporate boards. They want more women in the C-suites and in higher level management because they know that affects companies' bottom lines. So there really are a lot of different beliefs about the importance of women. But the only sword that I have and that I know that works and that is sharp enough to do the job is the sword of education. We used to have a long mission statement at the Women's Success Center. We've transformed that into a very short one, with that transforming word being important. We say, graduating women, transforming lives. Graduating women, transforming lives. And when you transform lives, you transform society. And you help children, you help the entire group move forward. And so I truly believe in education.
And Ann knows this report I wrote a while back on the value of higher education for women in Utah. When we did a study around the state, we found that most women believed that you should only go to college really because they wanted to get a job, and economic reasons. But there's so many other reasons, whether you work for pay outside the home or not. And Paige always talks about that, how she uses her education every day of her life. So Bill, what are your thoughts? And you really you see some poverty, and I mean, you see a lot of them.
What I have a chance to see is what happens with the absence of education with women. And I'll talk about one that hit me most strongly when I was talking to just a good friend yesterday, is even the topic of domestic violence. As we started the Battered Women's Shelter here about over 30 years ago in this town, I remember sitting down with some of the women, and the reason they were afraid to fleee was they did not have educational skills and thus job skills to be able to get out of a domestic violence situation. So being weak and uneducated put women and children in a very vulnerable place. So you start looking at most of the social issues that we deal with, from poverty to health outcomes, to educational attainment for even the children, to domestic violence, to on to substance abuse or whatever. Education is a phenomenal indicator and predictor of success through some of those various challenges. Health outcomes are higher with people of higher education, of course, income, et cetera. So many of the issues that we deal with in United Way, the lack of education becomes a contributor to it.
And Bill, I teach lots of our business students, and I have students all the time that come to my courses that don't believe that we really have poverty in the state of Utah, or that we don't have domestic violence, especially in our county, or things like that. And it's just a shock how little people kind of know. And what would you say to that?
Poverty is real. The difference of our community than some communities is that our poverty is more mixed through the towns than just having it in a particular central spot. But our poverty numbers are remarkably high. 14% poverty for the county. That's a lot of folks in poverty. That's a lot of children in poverty.
And don't you see specifically that the women, well, it's the women that don't have education that are so high in poverty, that are single women, but don't you see a difference in terms of voice and confidence with women who come, who have education versus not?
Without question, that women with education are the leaders that end up running communities, whether it be running the PTA or the boardroom. Those strong women are the ones that are changing our communities.
Yeah. Matt, are you holding that up?
Yeah, well, I was, because I've been in other settings with Bill where he's been so quick to chime in on this issue, because again, we're different sides of the same coin. Whereas I'm dealing with a university where we don't have enough young women coming and graduating, and And some people say, well, that's their choice, so why are you so worried about that? Or do you have some, hard, particular agenda about what they're supposed to do with their degree and after? And it's not. I mean, it's we want to provide opportunity for women to do whatever it is they'd like to do. But the problem is, if they don't get here and they don't finish a degree, then too often they end up in the projects that Bill's talking about, because a marriage goes south, or something happens and they're in an isolated or vulnerable situation, and then they're dependent on welfare and the care of the state. Whereas if we could get them here in the first place and get them educated, it provides much more opportunity and to avoid some of the areas where Bill's work, which is so extraordinary, helping people. I think he and I would both prefer to have fewer people in the situation to begin with, and education's key. And too many women are vulnerable because they don't make that choice for education from the get-go.
Thank you. And Ron, I'm hoping that you'll talk more about, because the Lieutenant Governor is not here and you sit on the board with me, and we're working on that board on the Women's Leadership Institute to get more women to run for public office. So I'm hoping you'll talk about the two things. Is why do we need more women to lead in terms of running for public office, but also why do we need women at mid and even top levels in companies?
Well, I really appreciate that question, because it is so true. It's not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. And being in a large corporation, I've had the opportunity to watch as around the boardroom, and in our board, we have 2 out of 8 who are women on our board. And we need to do better, but that was a good start. We also around our executive table. But what I've realized is that, it's the perspective. Being an engineering student, I learned a lot of equations and a lot of things like you do in engineering, but none of that could I use today. But the best thing I ever learned in engineering was how to solve a problem. And I've always loved, and some of you may be too young to remember the movie Apollo 13. There's a segment in that has always been one of my favorites. And it's the point where they dump the box of parts on the table, if you remember. And it starts out with, Houston, we have a problem. And they dump the parts on the table and they say, we've got to solve a problem, and this is what we have to work with. Well, basically what I learned in engineering was that same philosophy, that it's the way to solve a problem is to take as many inputs and diverse inputs to come up with the right answer. And it's something that we use every single day, whether it's in our personal lives, whether it's in our business lives, in our careers, we're solving problems. And the best way we can make good decisions is to get the best inputs. And what I've realized in 36 years of doing what I do is the fact that you get a diverse opinion. And whether it's in politics or whether it's around the board table, that the best thing you can do is have diversity of opinion and inputs. And you don't get that with an all-male board. You don't get that with all-male politicians. And I think there are different perspectives. And I've seen it so many times, where we will think we've reached a solution, and one of the women on our board or in our management team will say, wait a minute, we haven't thought about this. And it's a perspective that is different. It's not better, not worse, but different, and we make better decisions as a result of that. So, whether it's politics, and I'm just amazed at the abilities of so many of our women politicians, and that's not just in, national situations, but community situations. They bring a freshness, a perspective that we really need to listen to, and that's the part men could do a much better job of.
Thank you for finally admitting that, Ron.
Well, actually, you don't know, but Dr. Madsen put shock collars on us, and if we don't get to the right answer very quickly, we get a little jolt. But no, I'm just kidding. But it really is the truth.
I just need to make a quick comment. Last month, I was speaking to about 400 junior high and high school young women, and I asked them, do you think there's a problem because we only have 15% of our state legislature as female legislators? And I just waited, and they're like, probably not. No. And then I'm like, there is a problem because of what you were talking about. We just, as women, and I was raised with 6 brothers, so I do things both male and female or masculine, feminine. But we think differently. We just we care about things a little bit differently. And so there is a problem. We have less funding in the state for poverty and social programs and even education than we should. And I think in part, and I know this is true, that it's because we don't have the women's voices really pushing some of those issues. Thank you very much. The next question is the core of the thing. I mean, why should men care? And who was it? Someone said, I think it was my friend Dave out here, that topic assumes men don't. So it's the title that I put. So I'm not assuming men don't care. I know you care about strengthening women. So maybe I should have put, why should men care more about strengthening women? So why is it important? So I'm going to start with Anne, because she can give the female perspective on why men should care about strengthening women. And then we'll just move from there.
Well, I've had so many good men in my life. You know, I grew up in a place in Idaho where it was somewhat rural, and I didn't have any brothers, and I had horses, and I was kind of the boss of things, I guess. And that boss word is supposed to be a positive one now. Anyway, I just didn't know that women couldn't do everything. I grew up thinking that they could, and I think that's what has made me a bit of a unicorn. I really wasn't, maybe a petri dish, maybe in Idaho, something like that. But I just had the best upbringing, and so now I keep stumbling over, well, why wouldn't men help women? Of course they would, and that's really been my experience. I think when I looked at the literature, excuse me, the White House Project had a very interesting perspective on this. It was called helping women engaging men in gender initiatives and what change agents need to know. And I thought, you know, this is a very profound thing, because we know there are so many men that want to help and that will help. And you can't have the yin without the yang, right? But there's something about fears about making mistakes, if they'll sometimes worry they're going to unknowingly commit something that would offend or that wouldn't be easy. There's also something known about fear about loss of status. They're pointing to fear about other men's disapprovals. And I thought, well, you know, these are all factors, but what really makes a man into a champion for women and gender issues? They identified a key factor, which was that they say that men that have a strong sense of fair play, that believe things should be fair and ethical. And when you get right down to it, that's ultimately what feminism is. Do you believe a woman should be paid the same money for what a man does if it's the same job? Yeah, you know, I do. And having champions that believe in this sense of fair play, and perhaps it can be influenced a little bit, they said, through men that have experienced some pain of marginalization or exclusion firsthand themselves, they then have understanding for what it would be for females. So I think those are interesting points, Susan.
It's interesting that many men who are great supporters of strengthening women tell me that things changed once they had a daughter. So that they kind of got a little bit more once they felt it. Just what you said, they just felt it. So, Bill, do you want to, or we can go with what?
You and I have talked about this many times.
Yes.
I don't think there's any father who, when they first put their daughter in their arms, say, "Gee, I hope she's a weak girl." I think we're all saying we hope she's strong. I don't think we realized how many times through life, as they grow up, and my daughter's now 18, that we get tested on that, and we discover that the rest of the world doesn't always believe that they should be strong. Whether it be an example where a girl is called bossy, yet no man is ever called bossy. And that and I was just shocked to discover.
I think you're bossy, Bill, but other than that.
Thank you, President. Thank you.
But didn't your daughter get called bossy at one time? You told me that story.
She got called bossy, and wait a minute. I've never seen these teenage boys weren't being called bossy, and so I think we go through this experience where it does change when you become the father of that little girl, but then you start discovering there really are some barriers in society that, frankly, I was shocked by, and I thought I was pretty open on these things that. What, you're kidding? That really happened? And so I think there are some things that we are sometimes blind to that really become these barriers, and that we have to keep being proactive to watch out not only for our daughters, but for our daughters.
And,
But do you think that's changed over time? I'm a father of 3 sons, so I'm a lousy one to say anything about this. But I know when I was raised, I had a sister, and my parents were the most supportive parents in the entire world, supported both of us in everything we did. But I noticed a difference in what were perceived roles of what I was expected to do and what my sister was expected to do. I think we're improving in that. Don't you think, parents
I
today
think
are-
it's changing, absolutely changing, but I think it still keeps hemorrhaging and popping up in places that I was surprised by, whether it be at a family gathering or this and that, or just the words we choose to use, that we may be still pulling in some pretty old paradigms that I'm surprised that we're still finding used.
And the research, I was just going to cite the research, numerous studies actually, when you do surveys of companies and different things, with women and men, the responses are different. When you ask, are there differences in treatment or policies between men and women, the women will say 10, 20, 30% more than the males that there's a problem. So sometimes you don't know. You don't, as men, sometimes if you're not paying attention, women feel it a little bit more and will say, did that make sense the way I described that study?
You're saying we're clueless, and that's the way my daughter would say it, yes.
So thank you. Anything else you would like to share on this, or should we go with?
So I'd make 2 different arguments. First of all, I agree with everything that's been said. So I'll try to add something here with 2 different arguments for why men should care about strengthening women. One is an ethical argument. And I'll just, to put it succinctly, I was just reading the other night, The Brothers Karamazov. There's a great little line in that novel where one of the characters just teaches this little, I think, ethical truth that all are responsible to all. So the problem we have, though, is the thing that cuts against that is that we have this nature to be clannish, so boys gravitate to boys, girls gravitate to girls, racial groups gravitate to each other. I mean, you can think of all the different cleavages, and that pulls us back. But I think the supervening ethical principle is that all are responsible to all. So men have an obligation to women, just like women have an obligation to men. And we just have to learn to overcome the again, natural proclivities. Some of it, it's not like it's, bad or, it's a good thing that men feel a sense of brotherhood or whatnot. But you have to learn to have that, but then have that plus, and reaching out to women is part of that. So I think there's an ethical obligation to do it. And then the second is just a very practical issue, is that men are often in a position, given the way the world works in many places still, and they're just in a position to help. And to be able to do things for women that other women are not able to do because they're not in that position. Now, again, that's changing, and it's not saying men rule the world, but there are still places and companies and industries where it is still kind of a man's world, and unless a man does help and does care, it's not going to change. And so I think that's another reason.
Thank you.
And I'll give a very short but very direct answer to it. Why should we? It's, again, everyone wants to succeed. From a business, corporate perspective, the statistics prove it out. Abraham Lincoln said, rely on the facts. And if you look at the facts, companies do better that have more women involved in leadership positions. And you can't kick against the facts. And so, why should we? From a selfish perspective, it just makes sense. And so I think if we want to succeed, we've got to do better at that.
Well, I think 2 things. One, President, did you say cleavage? I don't know. I'm going to roll the tape back. I think there was something there that came through.
We can't edit this afterwards, is that?
Yes. President Holland and Dr. Kyle Reyes were my mentors in the UV Self program, and it was a very good opportunity for me to develop some leadership. And I have to say that, he said men are in a position to help. That's a wonderful way to frame it and look at it. Men are often in a position of power and in positions that some women don't have access to. If white males always promote white males, then you turn out a lot of white males. And you have to have that ability to reach into female world and help. That was my experience in UV Self. Thank you, President Holland. And I think, as I said before, the yin and the yang are important. It can't just be women helping women. It has to be everybody working together because it is a societal issue. It's everybody working together, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And then this is the question. It's so you believe in strengthening women, and I know you all do. That's why I invited you here. But what do you do? I mean, personally or professionally, maybe more in the workplace. I mean, what have you done you've talked about it, but what do you do to actually make it happen? And what do you suggest to others as well? So who wants to start? I'm just going to throw it out here. Okay.
I'll start. I think, it's important, and you use the word is do. We have to be doing something. We have to be actively doing things. And I joked about this the other day, but all the men in our company are upset at me because they feel like they'll never get another promotion at Questar. All the women are upset at me because we don't get them promoted fast enough. And so I figure it's a pretty good balance. If everybody's mad at you, then you're probably doing okay. But I think what we've tried to do is really identify how can we help? How can we build confidence? How can we build leadership? And we've done things such as mentoring programs that are men and women. It's not just for women, it's not just for men. And we have men mentoring women and women mentoring men. And I think it's been very successful in kind of breaking out of that mold to the point that was made. Are we giving people the opportunities? Are we giving them the opportunities to show that leadership? And a lot of times it's just, I think Ann said it great when she said, believe in ourselves. We've got to help people believe in themselves. And I had an example today, and I'll be quick with this, but President Hupfelin, that I know President Holland works closely with at Salt Lake Community College, she was put into an interim position as president of Salt Lake Community College during a search process. And I think in her mind, she thought, I wonder if I could be a candidate. And she said she found all the reasons to say, no, I shouldn't be. I'm not qualified. I can't compete with a national search. And it took several people in the community who said, Denise, you need to get your name in there. You can do this. And she said that alone provided the confidence for her to put her name in the hat. And what a great selection that the Board of Regents made. She's doing a phenomenal job. We've got to instill that confidence in our women.
Yeah, and I call it from the research, the TAP. I just spoke about this today, that women, 20 to 30% more than men, need the TAP. And that means in terms of promotions or running for office, men, if they're 50 to 60% qualified, will throw in their hat. They'll like, sure, I'll try. I'll put it in. Women, it's 90 to 100%. If they don't think they have the qualifications, they have to be almost perfect to put it in. But what the research is saying, that women 20 to 30% more than men need to be tapped, meaning I say, you should put you should run for public office. You should put a promotion in. Women don't even think about it until someone says that. And then the change is pretty remarkable. And just one more quick comment though, lean in, and some of that, I love that too. There really are two sides of, we need to help women themselves be more confident. That's internal barriers that some of us, we just work with that. But then there's also the external barriers, unconscious bias, pay differences, things that women can't control. We can control some of our own development, but you brought up kind of a mix of those, which I appreciate.
So I said earlier, I meant reference to Liz Hitch, and Liz actually left the administration to go up to be in the commissioner's office, and so when she left, I replaced her with two female vice presidents. I think you have to be careful here. I don't believe in quotas. I think quotas can be a bad thing, a counterproductive thing for any sort of social objective you have. But I do think gender could and should be a consideration. Certainly it's been a consideration for me, a consideration in terms of who I've brought around me in my cabinet, in our senior councils, we always make sure that we've got, multiple female voices on our committees, and the things that we do in terms of awards and recognitions. You've just got to be conscious about that. I think that's something that we do a lot. I'll say it right here. I've also turned loose Susan Madsen and Paige Holland, the dynamic duo. So we are so proud of what Susan's doing. We've tried to support that. We're an institution with limited resources. We're not able to do everything we always want to do, but we want to do it. We've made it a priority, and really to do things that don't necessarily relate to UVU. We've funded things that effectively have taken Susan beyond the borders of the university, because we do think it has impact on the university, but it just is important, and so we support that. And Paige is doing the same thing, and we make trade-offs at home about things that she otherwise would do or want to do, and where I take care of the kids so she can go be out and do the Habitat for Humanity and go give the speeches to the young women about going to school. So anyway, that. And then lastly, to round out all the great women that are here surrounding me that do this great work, talk about Ann and the Center for Women's Success, the Women's Success Center. Just a little bit about the history here. When I first got here, there was a kind of a women in crisis center, and those are pretty prevalent across the nation. And it's a tragic but a needed thing that we have those on campus, and so it's a good thing that we do that. But as in this early stage, as Paige and I were talking about women in education, and I was learning more about Susan Madsen and her work, and I was talking to some of the women on the campus, one of the things that came to me was that we needed something on campus that wasn't just about women in crisis, women in abuse, women in tragedy. We needed the positive side, and thus the whole idea of success in women. We needed role models. We needed scholarships. We needed public speeches. We needed mentoring and internships. And that's what we've done here at UVU, is create that center. And Ann is our star director, and I think making a real difference from an internal perspective by providing real time and real resources, but then also all these sort of symbolic teaching elements that are helping change the culture.
I was laughing over here a little bit because I haven't thought about this for years, but I had submitted a different proposal than the center. Do you remember what I'm going to talk about? And I scare people a little, and I try not to. But he kind of went away from the proposal I put together, and they came up with this center idea, which I remember you found me at the events center and mentioned it, and I just looked at you and I said something like, "This just sucks." This is not. Do you remember that?
How could I forget?
And he took me in a room. He said, let me talk to you. I think this is going to work. And I will say publicly that I was wrong and he was right, because it was the right thing to do. So and it didn't suck. I learned that. So no, he had a vision that I think was a little beyond what my vision was, and I appreciated that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I love that we have the center. I think we're different than many other places in the nation. The visionary that made it a success center, that's something that's going to serve us well. I do get nervous when I think about who will the next president be, and will we be something that's endowed.
It's going to be Ron. Yeah, so we get him out of Aggie land.
Newsflash.
But we want you to
So
stay.
can we move this into a political debate now?
He was threatening that he was going to be Donald Trump or something. President was going to be. He was going to be.
We went there. Donald Trump. Yeah, the shot collars may go off. I don't know what's going to happen here. You know, we have to give credit to Peggy Passon, who worked with the WISP scholarship program for survivors of intimate partner abuse. She's brought in over more than $2.5 million, isn't it, Peggy, now that you have for those women, which is amazing. You wouldn't think we have so much just right here in our own backyard. We really do. But I got so tired of seeing the ambulance at the bottom of the hill after all the terrible things that happened. I thought, can't we just drive that ambulance back up to the top? Can't we do things that make a difference for the life paths of young women? And that's what the Women's Success Center is about. And that's why, your research about what can a mother do, what can a father do, those kinds of things are super powerful. We know that just bringing young women on a campus, letting them see a university. We know that opening a piggy bank or a little savings account, it doesn't matter how much money, it matters that they're thinking, I'm going to school. That's what my family wants for me, and that's what I want to do. Those little things are huge. So again, it's always, how do we get the ambulance back to the top of the hill? How do we build that wall so that we're not collecting the carnage at the bottom?
And the research that I did around the state on the influence of a father on his daughter's college decision, we found profound influence on what fathers say and how they're relating to their daughters and encouraging them makes all the difference in the world. Yeah.
In anticipation of this discussion, this was a tough question. I'm thinking, well, what have I ever done? So I asked, I'm different than Ron. I'm in an industry or profession dominated by women. There are more women in the nonprofit sector than there are men.
Not necessarily at the top, like you.
Not the top.
Yeah.
Though in the top sector, it's a fairly even peer of my national group. So I asked some my team leaders, mostly women, this, what do you think? And they said, well, Bill, almost like they were saying, Bill, you're an idiot, which I get a lot. But you said, Bill, they said, you keep asking us and telling us we can do more. You keep pushing us out of our comfort zone. And the part that I didn't realize I was doing that was helping was I keep saying, what do you want to do in 5 years? What role do you want here in 5 years? How can I get you there? And I didn't realize I was doing that. But I asked several of my team members, and they said, well, you keep asking about what I can do in 5 years. And I think that was something I guess I learned that I can keep advancing. And as you just use the term of pushing or tapping on the shoulder, I think that works in our sector as well, that you can do more. Let's help you get there.
Thank you. Let's move to a question that is kind of a big thing, and it's socialization. So we have socialization. I mean, just as parents, as mothers, I mean, we say certain things to our daughters and sons, and oftentimes we treat them different. So we have raised kids, and they've, not just us as parents, but their teachers and so forth. So there's this unconscious bias and this kind of socialization. And what we found in Utah is a lot of young women and girls don't believe they're supposed to be leaders or whatever. There's just talk a little bit about what we can do as parents, or this is kind of a big question. How do we change in raising kids in society, in the unconscious bias in the workplace? Oh my gosh, this is a loaded question. I'm rambling, but talk about whatever you would like that relates to it. Sorry. Who wants to start on this one?
I have something, but if you guys want to go, you can go after me.
I think you can take the whole question. I think we're being socialized right now.
We just had Dr. Laura McCullough come on campus from Wisconsin Stout. She's an expert in gender and development, and she talked about some of the things that happen in classrooms. She said women have a proclivity to raise their hands. Boys kind of shout out answers, and sometimes we don't even raise our hands all the way and say, I have something to say.
Even at college level?
Well, she's talking more about elementary schools. I'm talking about young people, and it may still happen, but I don't have the data on that. I understand that in many circumstances, we start to shape people with what's an okay field for them to go into. I want to know why so many women don't want to become the dentist. They want to be the hygienist. And hygienists are great. Clean teeth are great. But it's that, why don't you want to be the principal? Why don't you want to be, the leader in the role? And that's a tough one. So just out of happenstance, today, my admin gave me something from housekeeping, Good Housekeeping back in 1955. And I read a few of these, and these were the Good Wife's Guide, what she should do. One of them goes like this: don't ask him questions about his actions or question his judgment or integrity. Remember, he is the master of the house, and as such will always exercise his will with fairness and truthfulness.
Why are you looking at me?
You have...
I would like to borrow that afterwards, though, if I could.
The rest of us were ducking, so she...
I mean, I'll look at somebody else. A good wife always knows her place. I mean, these kinds of things are antiquated, but then you have to ask how antiquated. You have to say, has our society really changed? Listen to him. You may have a dozen important things to tell him, but the moment of his arrival is not the time. Let him talk first. Remember, his topics of conversation are more important than yours.
This is starting to hurt.
Well, we laugh about things like that, and I think 1955, let's see, have we really escaped that? But, you know, there's some things that we need to change, and one of those is that women should go to school. They should. It's just a wonderful thing, and they need to do that. And, you know, they could do any job that they want to do. And if they don't want to work, they can just go to school because they want to be a better mom, or they want to be a better wife, or they want to be just a better person for themselves. Those are paradigms that we don't really talk about, but they kind of need an update.
And in Utah, just so you know, even more than the nation, we have less women majoring in degrees that are non-traditional. I mean, most of our women are really in nursing, social work, what's the other one? Elementary or school teaching. We just are dying to get more women in STEM areas, the science, technology, engineering, and math, and more in Utah than even the rest of the nation. So I would think that comes
it's
out
huge.
of socialization.
It's huge. I just had Luke Dean, who's a professor in the business school, come and speak to the women in my leadership class, and he said, you know, I help with the personal management, personal finance degree, and I have recruiters that are recruiting my juniors, even my sophomores. They want women to come and work. We're starting them at $60,000 to $70,000, and I just can't get enough women in that field. And I thought, why are we fighting over $25,000 in Goshen, Utah to be an elementary teacher? And I love you. I had a roommate that did that, and I said, oh, that's great. But, you know, when you can make $60,000, why wouldn't you? We don't think that way, though.
I'm thinking of the question as far as my daughter and I we'd love to travel together. So we do a lot of traveling together. And she knows everything about airlines, everything about airplanes. And people always ask, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to be a flight attendant? And my daughter has learned to say, or I first started coaching, now she says, no, I think I'd rather own or run the airline. But I'm amazed how she gets asked this question almost every time we travel. Do you want to be a flight attendant? From men, from women. And she realizes, no, she could run the company. She could be the president of, she follows Delta Airlines CEO's blog. You think Richard Anderson was her close friend. And I say that it's amazing how often the whole society, men and women, keep using the same language. And I, as a father, keep saying, oh, I think you could do more than that.
And we slip into that often. About a year ago, I fly Delta often, not happy with them right now, 30 hours late yesterday coming from Argentina. But I caught myself last year with an unconscious bias. I was sitting there waiting for pilots to get on, and there were two females that walked up, and I went, oh, and I'm like, I'd never seen two female pilots. And I thought, why did I do that? Do they need muscles to be a pilot? I just didn't know. I caught that in myself. So when we say unconscious bias, we're talking about men, women, everything. So we have that as well.
Yeah, I think of socialization, I think of a junior high school dance. Now, you all remember it. The girls are all on one side, the boys are all on the other, right? And they're talking about each other. And that's what we've got to break down. But I love the airline examples. I had one last summer where I went to Alaska, where I go quite often, and we were getting out of the airport in Juneau to get on a float plane to fly into the lodge we were going into. And I had my wife and another couple with us. Well, the van came up to pick us up, and it was a young woman, probably 22, 23 years old, driving the van. Well, I had the advantage because I'd been and flown with this young woman before, but I didn't say anything, and she picked us up, and I know that my wife and the other couple thought, we are going out to the plane, and then the pilot will fly us to the lodge. And she got out, opened the door of the plane, and all of a sudden it was so funny to watch the reaction, to your point, Susan, that, oh, she's going to fly us, you know. Are we okay? And I just started laughing, and I said, she's one of the best pilots of this whole airline, of these float planes. And she was. But it is that bias, and it's hard to break that down.
So I'm going to go ahead and tackle the tricky terrain here.
Thank you.
So I think this is tricky terrain in this state and in this valley in particular. And my guess is if we just open it up to the floor and people were really candid and honest here, you'd have some very different responses in this room about kind of the role of women and what their destiny and purpose is, and not to say there's or not to take a position about right or wrong, just as an empirical fact, there would be differences of opinion in this room about this. And so you layer that against everything that we're saying here, and it creates, it does create some dilemmas in some parts about how you tackle that and how you address that. And I think one of the dangers we face in that situation, especially looking maybe beyond the horizons of this valley and elsewhere, is that we look to, particular groups or cultures or ways of thinking about the world, and we think it becomes kind of a stark choice that women have to choose, or girls have to choose about, are you on a track for motherhood or are you on a track for leadership and career? And that, I think, is really going to be very debilitating in this valley because I think it's going to create some tension for some people in their belief system, and in other ways, I think it's going to be a rate limiting factor for the opportunities that everyone should have. And so all I can say is how Paige and I deal with this on a very personal basis, but it is to try to avoid that dichotomy of a hard either or, and talk less about one kind of way of life versus another way of life, but to talk about opportunities and skills. And that we want our daughters to have every opportunity that our sons have. We want our daughters to develop every skill and gift they have, like we want our sons to do that. And then beyond that, we have our own views and thoughts about life and motherhood and family, and they're important to us, and we talk about that. But it's not to the exclusion of the things that would give them every opportunity that they would have. And for us, that's been a way to negotiate some of this tricky terrain. For us, that may not resonate with any of you, but that's what we do, and I thought I'd say it.
And in one of the studies that I do, I need to say, I appreciate you bringing that up because we could have a lively discussion on that would take a long time. But I had collected data, and a lot of them were LDS, but not LDS. But it was interesting, some really in-depth data on why women weren't going to college and graduating. And we have quotes from LDS women who said that they were not supposed to go to college, that their church, they said, and I'm like, what church is this? I happen to be Mormon myself, and that's not my church, but that they were being taught that they're not supposed to lead, that they're not supposed to do these things. And so there's some assumptions in cultural things that men are supposed to be the leaders sometimes, and that women are, I get that quite often. And I also get, and I've been asked some blunt questions, blame on the Mormon Church. I have to be blunt. I get that from people. And of course, I served an LDS mission, and I know my doctrine well, and I know what my doctrine teaches about that women should be strong and so forth. So there's still some tricky terrain with that, but I think there's some misunderstanding about even some church beliefs in the church, but about things that are more cultural. Anne, do you disagree?
Well, I'm just smiling.
Okay, you just agreed.
You painted this beautiful picture, and you said everything but the word "and." And to me, "and" is the word. It's motherhood and education, or it's a job and something else. It's dipping your toe in it and then deciding to stay, not just I'm going to drop out. That old adage of the MRS degree, I don't think that's what we send women to school for, not just to get married and then they're done, right? We need them to graduate. But when somebody says to me, well, my new husband and I are going to kind of tag team, I'm going to put him through school, and then when I have a chance after the kids, I'll go to school.
What happened?
Well, I mean, the statistics start rolling through my database, and I start frowning, and they look at me like, what's wrong? And I think, well, it might work out that way, but it probably won't, and I feel very strongly that this is sacred ground. It's a very personal decision. Everybody can make that decision, but for me, my Success Center has many, many women who went down that path, and then at 40-something, everything went south, as they say. And so, we know that happens, but how about if you both still go to school? How about if you keep taking some classes or you take some online classes? But these are conversations that you have to have up front, and you have to know how you'd like to proceed. And I think, we learned that a lot of those young women that you surveyed, they feel guilty even getting an education if they don't know exactly what they want to do with it. If I don't know that I want to be an accountant, then I should just wait until I really know what I want to do. There's so much discovery that's important. We need to encourage our young women. It's okay to start something and to start checking out what you want to do with it and to change your major and to do some things. The worst thing is that, once we get them through the doors here on this campus, and we know from our numbers that we don't get enough in the door in the first place, our recruitment isn't strong enough. When we have somebody that does start, we will only graduate 1 in 4 of those women. And that's a tragedy, because so many of them say, see, I told you I wasn't college material. I told you I couldn't do math. Those kinds of things take everything sideways, and you have to be able to reassure. And somebody that's your boyfriend or your husband or your dad, they need to be telling you you can do it. You want the best for Mitzi and Grace as much as you do for Jake and Danny. But I don't think that we're vocal about that sometimes in our families. We have to say it. I want the best for you. You deserve an education. You have to stick in there and do it, even if you don't know exactly what you're doing. I mean, these are huge conversations, but they need to be had.
And the research is very clear, not just Utah, but around the world, that women specifically, when they fail or struggle, they say, I'm to blame. I'm not good enough. Men do not do that. I mean, sometimes they do, but
Ron does that.
Men will say, well, that's a hard course. That's a hard instructor. Women will say, I'm not good enough in math, and that's why. And so there's different ways that we help each other understanding those things. Bill, have you seen any challenges in this area, particularly with women in our area and county, or either one of you?
I'm always amazed, and I'm going to maybe take a slight different twist. As I do more and more exploring community, I'm convinced that one of our real areas that we create leadership among women in our community actually is in our local PTAs. My challenge with that is we have not found what to do once the kids graduate from elementary school. So the challenge I'm seeing is how to create this pipeline of this amazing leadership that you see miracles happening in elementary schools all over the community by amazing leaders. And we need to find this conduit to let that leadership be growing once their kids graduate elementary school. So I take that slight little twist on it is the challenge is we see these moments of leadership, then we find them pulling back out.
And they don't continue to
we can't allow, we need to find a way to use that beautiful formation of leadership happening and let it keep moving forward.
And is some of that confidence? Or their comfort zone? We as women like to stay in our comfort zone more than men. And the learning actually comes when you're out of the comfort zone.
I don't think we have a conspicuous path out of it yet.
Oh, okay.
And in politics, you have the path of, okay, you maybe go to school board and the city council. You have these kind of paths. I think we need to find some paths from some obvious places where leadership is thriving and help create more conspicuous paths to the next level. That ought to be our place that we're looking for board leadership, for trustees leadership from that kind of pool.
I guess just to emphasize the points, and I totally agree with everything that's been said, but we had this situation in our company where I looked at, in fact, the HR director, who was a woman, brought in and was concerned. She said, we've got a much higher percentage of women in the company that work for the company than we have women in leadership positions. And so I asked her, I says, I want you to go back And I said, tell me, I want to see the entire list of women that work for our company. And I said, I want to see what their educational background is and some other factors also in there. And what it showed was quite interesting in the fact that close to 50% of our employees are women, but a much smaller percentage are in those leadership positions. But when I matched up the percentage that are in leadership positions with those who had education, it matched right up. And that was an eye-opener for both of us, because I said, we're not recruiting the way we should be, and we're not emphasizing our educational assistance programs in our company the way we should be. And the way to correct this problem, and it seems like, you know, a lot of the questions, Susan, that you've asked, we keep morphing back to the importance of education and providing opportunities, whether it's, you know, sharing, like Ann said, not saying, okay, I'll get the education, then if things work out in the future, my wife can go back to school. It's figuring out ways to make this work, because I really believe that it keeps stemming back to education. And if we have the women in our company that have the educational background, they will stay even par with the men on those promotion opportunities. And that's where we've got to get. We're promoting based on the most qualified, but allowing women the opportunity to get that qualification.
Okay. Excellent. Did you have a?
Well, I just was piggybacking on what Ron said. You know, my husband works for Adobe, and I hear a lot of stories about men and what they do in that field. And then we have a board member, Tamara Gaffney, that's over their digital index there, and she told me, Ann, I'm really worried. I don't have enough women. I don't have enough women colleagues, especially at these upper levels. You know, it's the higher, the fewer. And she said, I went to my PR and HR people and said, you know, what are we going to do? And she was told, you know, it's not our problem that there aren't enough women in Utah that are qualified to do these technical jobs. We will bring them in from California or India or wherever we have to get them. We just can't get, you know, worried about Utah not having enough women. And I thought, well, I'm worried about it. That's my job. I worry about that every single day. But it was disturbing to me to think this company's just had to move on to not have those people available. What are they going to do? You know?
Thank you so much. That's a somber kind of note, but good to understand. So I just looked at the time, and my gosh, we did not get through. I had too many questions. I knew it. But let's just go to, I would like each of you to just give your advice specifically. And if you are here without a male, you can give this advice to your male. So what advice do you have for men, these men in the room, on how they can really step it up even more? I mean, if they're here, I bet we have pretty good supportive men if they're here, but how can they further support, inspire, and motivate girls and women to become stronger and to be leaders? So do you want to start here and go down?
Sure. I guess I'd use the word encouragement. I think that we fail as men in really providing that confidence and that encouragement to the women in our lives, whether they're our peers at work or our families, our daughters, our granddaughters, to give them encouragement and say, you can do it. In fact, not only can you do it, you would be phenomenal at doing it. And I think a lot of times it's a very small lift that many women need, just to have somebody say, I believe in you, you can do it, and not only that, you can be great at it. And I think we're lacking our ability to give more encouragement, provide the opportunities, but to just encourage and build confidence. Because I think so often it's just that little spark of confidence that somebody gets, and all of a sudden they realize, yeah, I can do this. And not only can I do it, but I did it. And now I can do it again. And I think that as men, we need to be more encouraging, more promotional, to say, take the time. You know, we'll work with your schedule. We'll get you back in school. We'll do whatever it takes. But I need you in this role because you can make us successful.
Thank you so much. Matt.
So,
President.
yeah, two things. One, very tactical, and it's not going to apply to all men. It'll apply to fathers, fathers of daughters, and maybe even a certain subset of daughters. So one of the real discoveries for me in this has been the power of athletics for girls. And I was not prepared. I guess I sort of went into early fatherhood thinking I'll have athletic sons and my girls will dance, and but my girls showed no aptitude or interest in dance, no aptitude or interest in gymnastics. That's what their mother did, but that just did not work for them. So, and it wasn't that we weren't necessarily determined. It just kind of worked out this way. But we tried soccer, that didn't really work. We tried softball, that didn't work. We tried tennis, that didn't work, and then we found volleyball. And this has changed my girls' lives. And my daughter is going to be the senior setter at Mount View High for the volleyball team, and she was the team captain as a junior. And she's out there barking orders and getting her team energized and picking them up when they're down. And I am watching her develop into a leader before my eyes because of athletics. Now, I say that recognizing there's just some girls that athletics won't work, just like it doesn't for some boys. And so it's limited utility. But if you can, and don't give up if it doesn't work on sport 1, it might be sport 5 like it was for us. That can make a huge difference in girls' lives to gain confidence, to have leadership opportunities. So very tactical piece. Second thing, and this is an echo of something Ron's been saying all night, and I absolutely believe it too. Men, do this for yourself. First of all, you miss out on the richness of life, insights, enjoyment, to collaborate with women in building something and doing something. You don't cut yourself off from that as a personal matter. You're going to miss something, and so are your companies and your organizations and your projects. You need these women in your life for your sake as much as for theirs.
Thank you so much. Just one additional thing that my research, global research, has, besides sports, is high school speech and debate. Junior high and high school speech and debate. That,
for the non-athletic, that would be another option.
That was powerful. I interviewed 10 of the women governors in the United States and 10 university presidents and other research. That speech and debate was, a lot of them went that. They were older and they didn't have the option for sports. Yeah. So just another idea there. Dan.
I'm going to start with something very, very basic. And before I had this job, I wouldn't have said this. But first of all, simple kindness. There should never be breaking somebody down with words or with violence. It should always be treating women with respect. RESPCT, as Aretha would say, super important. And making sure that, you teach your children. I remember my grandfather saying to my older male cousins, you never hit girls. You never. And I think those simple things, first of all, we shouldn't even have to talk about it. But because of the work I do, we do need to talk about it. And then I'd move on to a higher plane of the now, the power of now, the power of opening your mouth and saying to somebody, you're good enough, you're worth it, you can do this. I know you can learn how to do that quadratic equation. I know we can make things happen. Teaching them that it's okay to take credit for something wonderful that they've done. So many women will say, I was lucky, it just came together, or it was a team approach, or it was, what's wrong with saying that you helped make it happen or you did make it happen? Those kinds of things, encouragement and opening your mouth, I think are the most important, whether it's your niece, your neighbor, I don't care, but start talking to especially young girls and telling them, wow, you're amazing. I saw you catch that ball, or I know that you would be great at this. Whatever it is, you have to open your mouth.
And it has to be sincere. Though, just given surface level, you're great. The research is saying that praise is not, but when you say, if someone had a really bad basketball game, but they hung in there and did defense, then don't say you had a great game. Say, you hung in there and I'm so proud of you for hanging in there. Just very accurate is what the research, thank you so much.
I'm going to probably focus on everyday opportunities. I've been experimenting, it's just my own way of interacting with folks, but as you're in the 7-Eleven, as you're at a McDonald's and you catch, and I'm thinking of at McDonald's just recently where I was talking to a woman on a regular basis, I get my grilled chicken sandwich and I kept encouraging, hey, you're great at service, somebody you're going to own the restaurant. And the other week it was, hey, I forgot to tell you, I'm going to go back to college. And I think that there's our everyday moments that we can encourage those that we interact with at the 7-Eleven, at the convenience store. Often many of these women who have not seen that opportunity, but we often just as we're visiting with them can see that moment of leadership and strength, and we can encourage them, not just our kids, not just our grandkids, but I think we have a chance to encourage our neighbors and everyday people that we run into. I think we have a chance to encourage and let people know that they can do it.
Thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks so much. You see, we have cameras in our room. This year, we are in a partnership with UEN, which is the Utah Education Network. And so we film the programs. A lot of people can't get down to UVU for things. We have a lot of people that watch these after. This program, as well as the other ones that we've had for this year, are on our website. And if you have not been on the website or on my monthly email that comes out, because if you signed up for this event, you will now get those emails, and the links are there to get to the website. We have lots of different resources. We're a few minutes over, but we're short of, I know it's at 8:30, so you're planning on being here, so there's time for you to please eat, and hang around and talk about these questions. Talk about how it relates to your own life. Talk about how we, whoever, if you're a man or a woman, can help strengthen women and strengthen our sons as well on these issues, and men around us. Thank you for coming, and I think it's just right out this door, right there. Thanks.